Welcome to the Ocean Studio here as part of the Iowa vlog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. It is the 27th of November, 2025, which means that this is what Americans celebrate as Thanksgiving Day. I thought I'd begin by just sharing an insight that may not be known to many of you. But Thanksgiving was not a celebration of the Native Americans feeling sorry for the pilgrims and deciding to feed them rather than allow them to starve to death. Had the Native Americans actually been in that position, of course, it would have been in their interest to have them starve because of the fact that they would perpetrate apartheid and genocide on the native populations, all in the name of their wannabe man god. So it was not a positive encounter for the Native Americans by any perspective. The origins of Thanksgiving as a national holiday actually date back to the Uncivil War in America. Lincoln, who was a racist during the Lincoln Douglas debates, he actually said that the fate for what he would have called Negroes at the time, and sorry to use the term, that's just the term that he would have used at the time, was to put them in concentration camps. He wanted to do to them what later was done to the Native Americans and put them in separate places. It was Lincoln's opinion that they did not have the wherewithal to integrate with Europeans and that they were inferior to Europeans. And so his view was the solution to the problem of having so many, as he would have used the term, Negroes in the new country of America was to put them in concentration camps. It was one of the great travesties of history that presents Lincoln as the great emancipator. He actually did not emancipate anyone because there were no slaves in the North, and it was only well into the war before he issued the Emancipation Declaration, which only released slaves in the South, of which he had no governing authority. So even that is a myth. The Thanksgiving holiday that we know now is a product of that horrible war where 600,000 Americans died over an issue that was actually states' rights. Did states that had the right to determine whether or not they wanted to be included in this new union also have the right to decide they did not want to be included any longer? In other words, did they only have freedom of entry but not freedom of exit? And that was really the issue that the war was fought over. And you see that there were a number of states in the South that joined a confederacy. And during that war, rather than resolve it amicably and to say, listen, the fact is that slavery is a horrible institution. Nobody should be enslaved. It is actually an inefficient way to develop economy as well. By the time you look at all of the costs pursuant to slavery, paying people to work and having them be responsible for their food and housing is actually better for everyone, and it creates incentive for everyone, and it drives everyone so that they're contributors to the system. We have, as you can see, a fairly significant trade wind here. It just moved one of our lights in an odd direction. We'll go on as long as we can. Trade winds are part of the life here in the Caribbean. So the fact is that slavery is a horrible institution. It unfortunately has been part of human civilization really from the beginning. Slavery, it was the lowest tier on the caste system, and the caste system was such that the only people that had any freedom were the kings, limited only to the kings. The queens even didn't have any freedom. The next in line, under the direct orders of the king, were the generals and the priests, and they had to serve at the king's orders. And so you go down the line, the farmers and the merchants were essentially serfs. They had no freedom of any kind. They couldn't decide where they were going to live or anything else or what they were going to do. So it was a horrible system, and that system was pervasive. If you check human history, both in the old world and the new world, the caste system was everywhere. It was integrated into part of Greece, where we think that, oh, wow, they were the first to have democracy, which means they must have had human rights and freedom. It's just not true. And, well, there was the Roman Republic. Well, it had the most delineated caste system of them all. And it was horrific. And all of these nations enslaved people to be their labor force. As a matter of fact, what's interesting about democracy is that the longest lived oligarchy, none of them were actually democracies, they were all oligarchies. The longest lived oligarchy was Sparta. And Sparta was best known for enslaving all of its neighbors. It turned all of the men in Sparta to warriors. So they were abused as children, so they'd be tough warriors. And then the Spartans taught them how to ravage their neighbors, so that neighboring Greeks were enslaved by them and had to work for the Spartans. And as I say, the Spartan men were nothing more than warriors to enforce that slavery system, and the women were absolutely nothing but warrior makers. They were, as Islamic women are today, they are the wombs of jihad. And this was the longest serving oligarchy of the time. So, our history likes to glamorize things. And as it relates to Thanksgiving, the glamorization of Thanksgiving is that during the prosecution of the Civil War, Lincoln didn't like the fact that McClellan was too methodical, and that he was not willing to sacrifice an inordinate number of men to injure an inordinate number of Southerners. So Lincoln wanted to fire him, but presidents at the time were on shaky grounds in that regard. So he met with McClellan at, I believe it was the Barclay Plantation in Virginia. At the time, McClellan had permeated the area. His troops were there during the fall, and they held a powwow on how to get McClellan to be more aggressive. And the food and the dinner that was served, which I think is the first time, by the way, taps was played. That's that somber trumpet medley that is used when an American soldier dies. First played there, but that's the first official U.S. Thanksgiving holiday, if you will, was the persecution of fellow Americans during the Civil War, which was about the deprivation of state rights, and fought over an institution where there were horrible people on both sides, and a lot of just mixed messages, hypocrisy, if you will. For example, you look at Ulysses S. Grant. He was an alcoholic. He was a murderous man. He didn't care how many people died, even on his own side. And he was a slaveholder. And he was persecuting Robert E. Lee, who was actually quite the gentleman. Robert E. Lee didn't own slaves. Robert E. Lee owned a large plot of land that is now Arlington National Cemetery. The United States simply stole it from him. And as I say, he was not a slave owner. But the man on the Union side that was prosecuting the war for the Union was a slave owner. It's just how we destroy our presentation and acceptance of history, making it so revisionist. But that really is the story of Thanksgiving. It's all enveloped into this horrible war where 600,000 Americans died for nothing. A tragedy of great magnitude, where slavery was was so pervasive in civilization and just so easily resolved. There was always a better way to end slavery, and even in slavery, one of the things that very few people have an appreciation of, because it is so wrongly taught, is that 100% of those who were enslaved in Africa. They were not enslaved in the New World. They were enslaved in Africa. And while they were enslaved in Africa, it was because warring African tribes did what people did around the world. They were not unique in this regard. They were warriors. They attacked their neighbors. They were covetous. They were greedy. They were violent. They attacked their neighbors and they enslaved those that they conquered. And after a while, there were just too many slaves. And when you get too many of them, they're too hard to keep track of and to keep under control. So they just started killing everybody. And slavery started up again when Muslims around the 7th and early 8th centuries flooded out of Arabia after having perpetrated apartheid on all of the Jews of Arabia and having perpetrated genocide on them. Muhammad did. In the first group of Muslims after Muhammad's death, they perpetrated the war of compulsion on Arabia, forcing all Arabs to either surrender to Islam or die. And after prosecuting the war of submission, of compulsion on Arabia, Muslims then went both east and west, and they perpetrated the world's most hideous genocide. Over 200 million people, which was 1/3 of the Earth's population at the time, were murdered by these Muslims. Countless more were plundered. They were raped. They were enslaved. And what was easily the bloodiest, most disgusting period of world history. Literally 1/3 of the population of the world at the time was harassed and either murdered or enslaved by these Muslims. And that's how Islam spread. A great travesty, but we don't talk about that, unfortunately, and it's just not taught. It's this perception that everybody else that was a colonializer was bad, and they were, but the worst, by far, of all the colonializers, by far the most vicious, were the Muslims. And as they moved into northwestern Africa, because slavery is something that Muhammad did. Muhammad enslaved countless people, and he sold slaves to buy weapons to perpetrate Islam submission. Slavery is considered a honorable profession, not to be a slave, to enslave people and to sell slaves. Human trafficking is not only acceptable in Islam, it is an honored profession in Islam. And so the Muslims in the northwestern part of Africa did business deals with the Africans that were enslaving their own. So Africans enslaved Africans, they sold them to the Muslims, and the Muslims then sold them to the European shipping companies, who then shipped them to these Caribbean islands and to South America and to North America. And that's how the institution of slavery in the United States, these Caribbean islands, and in South America began. It was Muslims being responsible for almost all of it, in the high 90% of it, making it economically desirable for Africans to go off and enslave other Africans, such that there was this huge supply of African slaves, which the Muslims then sold to the European shipping companies, who brought them to the New World. And so there's a lot of blame to run around. the Africans doing this to them, to other Africans, and slavery is still a huge part of African culture. The Muslims, who were probably the worst contributors to the slave trade, and those European shipping companies, which were absolutely deplorable, as well as the people who bought them here in the Caribbean and in North America. And when you look at the post I presented on Facebook yesterday, which was the Romans crucifying all of those who were part of the Spartacus slave revolt, thousands of them along the Appian Way. The only thing that is worse than enslaving people is torturing your slaves. And so the most savage of nations in this regard were the Romans. They are and they were absolutely despicable. And there's this perception in history of the grandeur of Rome. No, it's the disgusting, despicable, hideous nature of Rome. They were in all ways untrustworthy, immoral, greedy, vicious. And so, again, we just have a horrible way of society coming to views of people and past events that is just horribly wrong. And my concern on all of this now is that people are, to a significant degree, replacing research and being judgmental in their thinking, being discerning and discriminating in the processing of information with really online propaganda sites like Wikipedia, and with AI chat bots, where rather than looking at the available evidence and coming up with a reasoned conclusion, they don't. They all suffer from the argumentum popular, this notion that if it's popularly held and popularly presented, it must be true. It's as if truth were subject to a vote. And so the most prevalent conclusion is the one that AI will parrot. And fact is that humanity has almost always been wrong. And the only way that we grow as people is when individuals recognize that humanity is wrong on an important topic and somebody points out what's wrong. But with the AI engines, they have a programming bias to any novel research. If you are able to demonstrate that something is wrong, the AIs will absolutely impugn what you have to say and will counter it with the popular appeal, the fallacy. Now, this in my case means a great deal, because I've been able to prove conclusively, beyond any doubt, using evidence and reason, that Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are all opposed to God, and that they are all counterproductive. But even with irrefutable evidence and some 13 books just on those subjects, some of them 825 pages long. You can see some of them over my left shoulder, screen right, as it would be. The AIs won't process it, won't accept it, won't even look at it, and can't learn from it. So we're entering a period where the popular myths of society regarding Christianity, for example, the world believes there was really a Jesus and that he was crucified, and that the New Testament is somehow affiliated with the Bible that includes an Old Testament, when none of that is true. The New Testament is in wholesale conflict with the Torah and prophets. Jesus never existed. He is nothing but the product of identity theft. He was a crude counterfeit of the actual Messiah and Son of God, though to David, who was our returning king. And Yahweh is not a man. Men cannot kill Yahweh. So the whole notion of Christianity is blatantly false. But when you prove it, in today's world, people can't process it anymore. The same thing is true with Judaism and the Talmud, and even to a greater extent with Islam, which I have demonstrated factually and irrefutably only exists because rabbis sold Talmud stories to Muhammad, which he attributed to Allah and then twisted for his own self-aggrandizement. This is the history of the Abrahamic religions. They're all counter to God. So I just thought maybe that would be an interesting introduction since this is Thanksgiving Day. Well, we're going to enter a new chapter of The Voice. The Voice is volume 1 of a series called Coming Home. It was written to focus on Dode David, primarily his Mizmor, but we go in and out of the Torah and prophets as well, because they have so much to say about Dode and the role that he played in fulfilling Yahweh's plan. And in this particular case, we're going to return to an early psalm, this one, the 6th psalm. And the chapter that we're going to be covering is called Above and Beyond. And it's about making persuasive arguments. And as I have pointed out so many times, there were prophetic revelations that are exciting to consider and explore pursuant to Dode, the actual Messiah and Son of God. And each is laden with wonderful possibilities. And yet we have decided, in most part, to follow the original plan and throughout this process in the Voice series and in these books, which is to go to the Mizmor, the Psalms, and to try to process them the best we can in order. Although we did jump out of line to systematically consider even some of the later Mizmor. And we are going to eventually, through Coming Home 4, I think we'll reach probably very close to the 40th Mizmor, covering all of them. As you know, because you have listened to other programs I have done from other studios here in the Caribbean, that we have recently translated and done programs on the 33rd, 34th, and 35th Mizmor of Dode. And we've covered so many others, like the 89th in virtually every studio and in many, many times, because it is the most essential piece of literature that exists today. So right now we're going to return, since we have covered the first 5, to the 6th Mizmor. And in doing this, by following this plan, we have found that the central chord of Yahweh's testimony is that a person like none other, the most uniquely special man in human history, is Dode. He was the one that God refers to as his chosen one. He was the one that Yahweh said that was anointed 3 times on his instructions. He is the man that Yahweh called the Son of God. None other bear that title but Dode David. He is also the one that served as our Savior. It is Dode who came in his second of 3 lives, just as he announced in his Psalms, to fulfill Passover. He was the one who was crucified in 33 CE. He is the one who arrived as Gabriel, God's most capable and confident man, to inform Daniel in 555 BCE that he would be returning in 33 CE, which is year 4000 Yah, to fulfill Chag Matzah, Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. So following in Moshe's footsteps, which is important because he is the person that God specifically spoke of in the 18th chapter of Devarim, Deuteronomy. He became Yahweh's beloved son. He became God's anointed Messiah. He is the tree of lives. That's why he's called the branch. And it is the role that I am playing now that serves as the tree of knowledge, pointing to and reacquainting all with everything Dode achieved and why it is essential for us to know at this time. Dode became Yah's chosen shepherd and king. More than anyone else and more than any of this, he is also the Zeroah, the protective ram and sacrificial lamb, God's strong arm. It is Dode's lyrics which sing their way into Yahweh's heart and that should pierce the heart of his people. He is also the Lamb of Passover. Dode, more than anyone, revealed the most effective way to observe and live the Torah. He was, as the Lamb scribed, he actually wrote the lone eyewitness account of his fulfillment of Pesach, Passover, in addition to matzah, unyeasted bread, leading to Bokurim, firstborn children. These stories are featured in the 22nd and 88th Mizmor, and then affirmed by his father, Yahweh, in the 89th Psalm. And he is going to be accompanying God upon his return, fighting as he always has for his people. He's returning at the sunsets on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations in year 6000 Yah, 2033. Then shepherding God's people into the pastures flowing with living waters during Sukkah. Everyone who is purged by the sacrifice of the bull, the Adamah Parah, on Teruah, will be allowed to enter this return to the Garden of Eden on Sukkah, with the trees of lives and knowledge intertwined at that time. So in the 6th Mizmor song, or psalm, we find Dode longing for this new beginning, for the Shamanith, the 8th octave, if you will, which sings to us about the 8th day of Sukkah shelters. Even at the time that I wrote those words, I didn't have a full appreciation of 8, and yet God is really insistent upon it. There are 8 who carry the Ark of the Covenant when it moves, as it will be moved to its rightful place on the Temple Mount, beneath a replica of the tent of the restoring witness, during the events preceding the fulfillment of Teruah and the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah in year 6000 Yah. The 8 people that move it will likely be the same 8 people that are designated during the Shabuah harvest. It's the same 8 people that are designated during Teruah and during Sukkah. And it speaks of the responsibility of the 7th day as it leads to the opportunity of the 8th day. You see, when we were back in the garden, Adam and Chawah failed miserably. They didn't work, they didn't listen, they didn't respond in a manner that Yahweh could trust and rely. And therefore, it was Yahweh who caused the fall of man. He said, "You are just not prepared. I can't let you out of this garden and be responsible for you. You're going to have to go out of the garden because this is not working for me. You're not going to grow in a manner that's going to present a genuine relationship. This is nothing now but you being dependents. You're deadbeats. And so I'm going to give you the opportunity over 6,000 years to get your act together. And ultimately, I'm going to prepare a new remnant of you to enter the garden again. And there will be then 1,000 years for you to learn why you need to listen, why you need to respond appropriately, why you need to learn, why you need to be industrious and contribute something to the relationship and to your environment, and why you need to present yourself as trustworthy for me to allow you during the 8th day, signifying infinity, off of this planet so that you can go explore. It was interesting, speaking of this 8th day and the 8th people who will be working to harvest the fruit of the tree of knowledge that will be restored in Gan Eden as we move back into it on Sukkah in year 6000 Yah, 2033. It's October 7th of that year. I was listening to an interesting program. It was a bit of a challenge. It was delivered in French last night, but it was about a scientist who said, you've heard that because of the fact that there are 2 trillion galaxies, and oh, by the way, if you go back just 20 years or so, 30, 40 years or so, we were convinced that the entire size of the universe was just our galaxy, the Milky Way. And to come to find out that no, our galaxy is only one of 2 trillion that we know of, and that number will change and grow as well as we develop better tools to survey the universe. But 2 trillion of these galaxies, and that they average about 2 to 400 billion stars apiece, and that each of those stars, many of them anyway, have planets. And so this scientist was going through that, and he says, because of the vast numbers, it has been assumed that life would be prevalent elsewhere, that we can't have been the only planet with intelligent life. Now, what he did not do is just go through the math, and the math says that going from inorganic materials to an organic life form, particularly one with a soul, that is able to replicate itself, able to observe and respond to the environment, and that through genetic mutation can become better rather than worse, because 99.999% of genetic mutations lead to an inferior status for the species and ultimately to their demise. And the odds against that are so absurdly high. It's in the range of 10 to the 53rd power. It's you'd have an infinitely better chance of a tornado whirling over a junkyard and building an operable 747 than you would of matter turning into life. And then you've got the issue of DNA, and since it is a 3-dimensional language, it had an author, and you just can't get there. But he wouldn't even focus on that. What he went through is to say how special this planet is, and I say this because I want you to know that Gan Eden, this garden that Dode is speaking of us returning to. I mean, we've done a lot of programs on us returning to the garden here recently. It was a protective enclosure, and we did not do well in that protective enclosure. But the Earth is also a protective enclosure, and it's not just a protective enclosure that's conducive to life. It is likely the only one in the universe. You heard that correctly. It is likely the only one in the universe. And what you find, if you think it through rationally, is that what we have learned is that the Milky Way is a very unique galaxy. About 5% of galaxies would be in this situation where we're reasonably set apart from other galaxies. And it is only when you are not in a congested part of the universe that life even has a chance to form, because there's just too much chaos in more concentrated areas of the universe. And so it's only about 5% of galaxies that would even have the potential to have a planet in them that is conducive to life. And then you have to realize that there's only about a 10% narrow band within a galaxy that is conducive to life. It pretty much has to be a spiral galaxy, and you have to be in one of the outer arms. If you get too far out, there is not enough stars that are like our sun, that when they go through their life cycle would create metals, would create the elements that would produce a rocky planet, and that would be those elements that could ultimately be shaped, as Yahweh says, into life. And so and if you move too far in, the black holes and the supernova explosions and cosmic rays and this sort of thing, it's just way too caustic to life. And so it's only about a 10% strip of 5% of galaxies in the universe where life, as we know it, is even possible. And then on top of that, you have to have just the right kind of star. These red dwarfs don't work because they're too volatile and they're too short-lived in terms of their lifespan. And the big superstars are way too powerful. And so it's only about 5% of stars that are conducive to life. And our sun happens to be one of them. Our galaxy has to be one of them. Earth's position in our galaxy happens to be correct. And so each of these things diminishes the possibility by about 95% each of the way through. And then you have to be like in our universe, if we were 10% closer to the sun, we wouldn't have an atmosphere. The sun's solar generation and waves would blow our atmosphere away, and it'd be impossible to support life. And if we were as much as 10% further out, then you couldn't have liquid water. So you have to be in a very narrow band, even within an acceptable galaxy, in an acceptable position within that galaxy, and an acceptable star, and this acceptable distance from that star. And then you have to have a super massive gas giant in that galaxy, like Jupiter, which very few solar systems do, that is way out away from the rocky planet, because if it was closer to the rocky planet, it would have too big an effect on its orbit and make it impossible for life to form there. But if it doesn't exist, then the bombardment of meteorites and asteroids would keep that planet inundated. Look at what happened to our moon, for example. It's just such that life, if it ever did conceive, which is impossible really mathematically, it would be instantly destroyed, like it was 60 million years ago with the dinosaurs. So you have to have that, but in 95% of galaxies, it either doesn't exist or the gas giant is way close to the star in those galaxies. And then you go further, you have to have a perfectly circular orbit, because if you have an elliptical orbit, you get too hot and too cold and portions of that orbit. But yet what we find is that 95% of planetary orbits are not circular. And so you've reduced it another 95%. And then what you have to have is something that most people don't even think about. Our moon is really, really unique. And our moon was created by two what would have been planetary objects hitting exactly the right way, with exactly the right angle, at exactly the right speed, and the Earth's initial formation to create a moon that is, well, our moon is so large by relative size to our planet that it's larger, for example, than Pluto, for example. It's the largest moon in our solar system, and it's made out of the Earth. The moon is, and without a moon of that size and that distance from our planet, life couldn't exist on this planet. It is what stabilizes our spin on our axis. What stabilizes our orbit. It has been hugely effective at diminishing the asteroid and the meteor hits on the Earth. But it also creates tides, and without tides, there is no life no life is even possible on our planet. And so we have a very unique situation with an abnormally large moon that is created out of our planet at precisely the right distance. And we're kind of fun to note that it's 400 times closer and 400 times smaller than the sun. So it can create solar eclipses that are just absolutely perfect, things that Yahweh will use as a sign of the times as we move forward. So this part is also essential. You have to have plate tectonics. If the plates don't move, which they're frozen, for example, on Venus, and they're frozen on Mars, life is not possible. Then you go to our molten core, which generates a magnetic field. Without that magnetic field, the atmosphere is not only blown away, but cosmic rays will kill all forms of life, making life impossible. Most planets, of the vast majority, it's only like our best guess is about 10% have of the rocky planets, which are a very, very small subset of planets, have a molten core. And from what we've been able to tell, it is exceedingly rare to have plate tectonics. And what we found is that it is exceedingly rare to have a moon relative size of our moon relative to the size of the Earth, and perfectly positioned for all of this. And so you just keep on going down the improbabilities, and what you finally find is that no, it doesn't matter how many other planets there are, or how many galaxies, or how many suns within those galaxies. The fact of the matter is that the Earth is special. There are no aliens visiting us because there are no other intelligent life forms, because there's no chance that they would be conceived. They would be able to survive. I was hoping there would be, but the fact is that those planets are going to have the loving touch, the design that Yahweh, and the great care that he used to create this planet that is like Eden, and he's going to turn it back into Eden so that it is conducive to life. We're the one place, and the enormity of this universe that is conducive to what we're doing now. When you look out and see that night sky, and you see the billions upon billions of stars, and you're only seeing, an infinitesimal fraction of them, to know that you're among the few who actually can conceive them, perceive them, think about them. So our return to Eden, so that we can equip a mortal remnant to resolve the issues of Adam and Chava, so that they're willing to work and contribute, which makes their relationship enjoyable. Without both parties contributing, the other party is a dependent, and that's not fun if it never goes beyond the dependent stage. That they learn to learn and find the great joy in learning. That's why the tree of knowledge is there. That they show a sense of responsibility, that such that we can be trusted, and that show a willingness to listen to God and to act appropriately. These are all things that Adam and Chava failed, and that we're going to have 1,000 years now to reboot the system and to create a group of people who can be trusted, who are interested in engaging and accomplishing something worthwhile, and who listened to Yahweh and respond appropriately. And it is those people who, after the whole earth is returned to the condition of Eden, will be allowed off this planet. And the only way we can get off of this planet is to have our physical bodies become disposable, so that our souls are literally enveloped in light energy, which enables us to maneuver in time and to maneuver in space. When you are essentially light, that means that you can go from one place in the universe all the way to another instantly. So while it may seem like at the speed of light that you would be moving at a phenomenal speed, but still finite, where the distances are still enormous, the fact is that on that photon of light, time simply exists. And as such, when speed is distance over time, if time simply is, then you can travel any distance in no time. And that's the reason why, as energy, we will be able to go wherever we want to in the universe. And when we get there, we can experience the normal flow of time when we take a part of our energy and convert it into a physical form to enjoy what I'm doing right now. I mean, I feel the breeze. I enjoy the warmth of the sun. I can hear and can speak to you with a voice in this. I can gesture. You can see my face and eyes and expression. And so it is a marvelous way to go and exist primarily as an energy-based spiritual being, with our souls, which are energy-based, enveloped in radiant energy and light. And then when we wish to convert it, E equals mc squared, Einstein's great formula, where energy is the same thing as matter, but just energy is just a much greater amount, that matter must be multiplied by the square of the speed of light to be equivalent to energy. So we'll be able to make this transition between things. And one of the great mistakes of religion and many people where they're so fixated on physical bodies. We had a song that Leah wrote that was criticized by YouTube yesterday because it had a picture of a statue. Yeah, your Leah just walked by with her little doggy on a pearl leash. It's very, very cute. But the reality was that it was a statue, but the statue had bare breasts, and you or Facebook, no, it was YouTube said we don't allow nudity. And while you probably didn't know that we would view this as a violation, so we're not a strike against you, but you need to change your cover imagery on this song. People just are so overly sensitized by bodies. It's the religious. You look at Islam, and women have to walk around in tents. You look at Christianity, and they want people hanging around like this. The mother goddess cult that has been so annoying to me began with this whole onslaught of you have to be modest. And when I said, well, but we're returning to the Garden of Eden, and did you bother to look at what the wardrobe was in the Garden of Eden? It happens to be wearing a smile. Now, why is that the case? Because you have to be comfortable being totally exposed to God to be as we should be in the garden, whether it was then 6,000 years ago or going forward now. So call it naked and unafraid. Naked and unafraid is the answer, and it is one of the reasons why Islam is so stupid. They want a lot of reasons Islam is stupid, but the Allah and the Quran tells Muslims that if they die killing for him, they're rewarded with multiple virgins and paradise. But the very fact is that there is no paradise where there's a physical body. If you're going to survive this life, it's going to be as a soul enveloped in energy, and you're not going to have a physical body. So it's just stupid. But then again, that's Christianity. Not only is it dumb that in Christianity, God is no bigger than a man, and in Christianity, men can kill their God, and in Christianity, the symbol of the religion is a dead God on a stick. But the very idea that, but he proved that he conquered death because he has an empty tomb because of bodily resurrection, it's going in the wrong direction. No, you don't beat death by going back into a body that was able to be killed. The body can be killed. The body can be mutilated. What can't be killed, what cannot be mutilated, is your soul, unless you've lived a life where God just says, I didn't know you, you didn't know me. You were deceived, but you were not a deceiver. Therefore, your soul is simply going to dissipate into nothingness. I guess that's similar to how a body would decay and to become nothing as well. So this whole eighth day, the 8 people that will be so critical to harvesting the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and this, what it represents in terms of affinity, is it's just the stuff of our tomorrow. It is what brings us to the future, and it's essential that we have an appreciation of everything the 8th day and shelters represents, as well as how we get there and who these 8 people who are going to be so special will be. I was doing something, Leah, I don't know if you know this, but this morning I told Rich, I'm retranslating the various places where Dowd, God's beloved son, our savior and king, is mentioned in conjunction with his herald, with his subordinate, Yada. And the first place happens to be in the first chapter of the Torah. God doesn't wait long to tell us about it, and it was on the 4th day where he made this statement. They made this statement, and there are 2 luminaries. According to God, these are 2 sources of light and enlightenment. And according to God, and I appreciate this, he says they're both great. He says they're both informative, they're empowering, they're enriching, they're enlightening, they're both great. He says, but one is Gadol. He is not just great, he's super great. He is the most preeminent of all. and super, super empowering and enriching and enabling. And then he says that the other, and that's a gadol, and then the other, the katan, is the lesser luminary. And he is a subordinate to the greater luminary. But what God actually says is something that is really comforting to me. He said that the greater of the two luminaries will be sovereign, that he will be the head of government, that he will be the one who is the most empowered, and he is going to carry out his responsibility through mashal, word pictures. He's going to be a very articulate individual, but that he is in charge. The government is his responsibility. He is sovereign. He is king. And the lesser luminary reports to him, is subordinate to him. And, that's music to my ears because of the fact what I've said for a long time is that it's so much more comfortable being a beneficiary, being anonymous, getting to enjoy the all the things that come along with being part of God's covenant family, and having somebody else has the responsibility. So in this particular case, if something goes wrong, I can say, I made a mistake, but I'm your responsibility. So it's your responsibility. Or when something needs to be resolved, I go, you're king, man. You're sovereign. It's your job. Happy to be here to support you, but it's your responsibility. It was delightful to read God right there out of the first chapter of the Torah and the first book of the Torah, saying Dod's in charge. He's the greater luminary, and he is sovereign. He is king, and so I get to serve him, and as we all do. And I want to tell you, that is really, really good news. So here we are. We recognize that Dode completed the first phase of the mission. He was responsible for fulfilling the spring mikre, Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, and that we know that Yahweh had a major plan for Dode, not only in his first of three lives and acquiring Jerusalem, acquiring the Temple Mount, protecting God's people, uniting Israel, writing these marvelous psalms so that we might know who God is, what he's offering, what he's expecting in return, and the role that Dode would play to enable the benefits of the covenant. And then all of the word pictures and the mashal that give us such wonderful insights into the mindset of not only Dode, but of Yahweh as well, and of the cast of characters that's going to be working with them. And so we have so much that we should be grateful for in his first life. And then in his second life, he made it possible for us to live forever, for us to inherit the covenant, for us to be enriched and empowered by God, to be adopted into God's family, to live forever, to be perfected. This is a pretty extraordinary thing. And he comes back in his third life with all of the responsibility on his shoulders. He's king for forevermore. He is God's influence in our presence. That's why he's called Elyon, which means the very hand of God Almighty. His throne is actually the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, and it will endure forever. He is the tree of life. So God had a lot to say about his relationship and the contribution of his beloved son, Dode. And it all reminds us of of Dode's craving for knowledge and inspiration, but also his humanity. Dode was in so many ways like us. He was a man who was learning on the job. He was a man who made mistakes and got up and dusted himself off and said, all right, let's go it again. We can do better next time. He was a man of great compassion, of great courage, of great intellect, exceedingly articulate, and yet fully human, with all of the kinds of aches and pains that we deal with on a daily basis. He began the sixth of his songs, this Mizmor, with these words: the enduring leader, La Ha Natashk, to approach, and on behalf of the everlasting conductor and the majestic director, who endeavors to lead and is preeminent and distinguished forever. So nachak is actually a verb and thus actionable in the text as modified by the pial participle. And as a participle, it is very much like the infinitive, where the verb is also a noun. So it is, nachak is an actionable title, if you will. This director, this conductor, is actively engaged. And it says, to the nakash, accompanied by stringed instruments. In other words, these are lyrics to a song that has melody. Above and beyond the 8th octave, a scale for eternity, for heaven and beyond. From Shamani and Shamanim, 8th and infinite in time, and relative to the spiritual realm. Well, we know Shamaim is a 7-dimensional construct, but it is infinite in time. And there is, to say that Shamaim is 7-dimensional, because that's Yahweh's favorite number, 6 plus 1 equals 7. And we know that the universe is 6-dimensional. This takes us to the point we would naturally conclude that Shamaim is the 7th dimension. But it doesn't have to remain that way. Yahweh could well be 8 dimensions, to have created a 7th dimension spiritual realm. And he could be more than 8 dimensions as well, and could take us even beyond the 7th dimension of Shamaim, of heaven. So it's something to think about. This was the introduction to, the dedication, if you will, of the 6th Mizmor or Psalm. Now, this is one of only 3 times that Shamanith, the 8th, appears in the text, each in reference to the instrumentation for a song. And since it is clearly related to Shamani 8, scholars typically consider Shamanith to be the 8th octave. In fact, the English word octave is based upon the Latin word for 8, octo. The issue with limiting it to this singular expression is that a harp can only play 6.5 octaves, not 8. And its range exceeds that of other stringed instruments. Further, our most accomplished singers have a 4-octave range, with the 8th octave residing at the upward limit of what people can even hear. It's the beyond. When we consider the scale of 8 in harmony with Yahweh's nomenclature, we find several thought-provoking ideas. The 8th day of Sukkah is an ode to eternal life with God in heaven. And in this regard, the word for 8, Shamini, is remarkably similar to the Hebrew word for heaven, Shamayim. And third, there are 7 notes in an octave, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, audibly affirming that Yahweh's plan, one which reverberates throughout time, goes beyond the 7th and into the 8th octave. Therefore, I suspect that Dode is dedicating this song to Yahweh in recognition of his desire to spend his eternity in his Father's company in heaven. He could even be saying something that I had not considered previously, and that is that Yahweh, who I've always assumed was at least 7-dimensional because he created a 6-dimensional universe, and you have to be a dimension beyond that which you create for you to build something that is of such scale. And in this, for example, we can build buildings, but they're out of the things that are already here. When you're creating something from nothing, you have to be a dimension beyond it. Where, there's the old cartoon that says, well, God, we don't need you anymore because science has figured out how to conceive life. Well, by the way, it's not true. Science doesn't have a clue as about the conception of life. They don't even understand what a soul is. But the fact is, okay, so they're having the conversation. We don't need more. We can create life just from dirt and that sort of thing. And so God says, okay, prove it. And so the scientist begins. He gets some dirt together and says, no, get your own dirt. And so this is really the point of if you're going to create a universe that is where you are responsible for everything in it, then you need to be a dimension beyond it. And so with Shamayim playing such an important role and it being the dimension beyond the physical universe, and it therefore being 7 dimensions, wouldn't we naturally assume, credibly conclude that Yahweh would be a dimension beyond that and therefore 8-dimensional? I think there's every possibility of that being true. And this, of course, means that God is not limiting us to what we currently know. And so Dode is dedicating the song to Yahweh in recognition that we will enjoy an eternity together in his Father's company in heaven, and that there could be even an opportunity beyond that. And he realizes that God is not pleased with the conduct of men on earth, and he certainly wasn't pleased with the conduct of Adam and Chawah, and clearly hasn't been pleased with the conduct of humanity in general and with Israel in particular, and that the conditions will be far better in the next life. Now, the sentiment expressed in this opening statement of Dode's song is central to our understanding, as it is universally ignored. The purpose of the Bereth, the covenant, and of the Torah, guidance and teaching, is Yakach, persuasively demonstrated and proven through Dode. He is the antidote to Rabbinic Judaism and to Pauline Christianity. He demonstrates that the Torah, rather than condemning, perfects the imperfect so that we can become beloved sons and daughters of Yahweh. Here's the opening line of the 6th Mizmor. Yahweh, you consistently prove your case through me with pervasive arguments which vindicate me and acquit through me. Eta yakach ani. You use evidence and reason, engaging in rational dialogue with me, making decisions and resolving disputes through me, demonstrating that you and I are right. It was written in the Hifel, which means that God is the subject, is making this possible for Dode and actually engaging with Dode as if he were a secondary subject. Imperfect, which means this has ongoing implications over time, and Jusuf, which is an expression of third-person volition. So Yah is continually enabling Dode to engage in the process of rational discourse within the parameters of free will. I love Hebrew. Hebrew grammar is just so utterly spectacular and so enlightening that translating from the oldest text is tremendously rewarding. And even for those who would say, well, I read and speak Hebrew, I don't need a translation. Oh, yes, you do. Because first of all, modern Hebrew bears actually only a fleeting resemblance to the Hebrew of the Torah. It is far more shaded and contoured by the Talmud and by English than it is by the original vocabulary of the Torah. And these interesting moods play no role going forward in Hebrew. They've gone back to the system of verbs being stuck in time, past, present, or future, as opposed to the idea of constrained in time or unlimited in time, and of the volitional moods and of the stems, which describe the relationship between the subject and object of the sentence pursuant to the verb. And so all of these things, doing these amplified translations, I can share with you so you have a much better appreciation of what is being communicated. So with all of the chit chat, let me go back to the beginning. We can pick up our pace in this. Yahweh, which is the proper pronunciation of the name of God, as directed by his Torah teaching regarding his Haya existence. You constantly prove your case through me with pervasive arguments which vindicate me and which acquit through me, thereby eliminating everything displeasing and disagreeable. Wow. So by the very communication that has been recorded by Dowd that he's had with Yahweh, God can vindicate. God can literally acquit those who capitalize on what they learn from this process. And that by understanding all that Dowd achieved in his, and will achieve in his 3 lives, and his unique relationship with Yahweh as Messiah and King, chosen one and Son of God, even Savior, that God proves his case. He proves exactly what he's trying to achieve, which is to have children that he can trust, children who will engage and make a contribution to the relationship, children who listen to him and respond appropriately, children whom he can trust when it's important to do the right thing. And so all of this is conveyed through Dowd. He proves his case through Dowd with pervasive arguments which vindicate and acquit. Not only vindicate Dowd, but provide salvation, acquittal, a not guilty verdict for the rest of us. It says that he uses evidence and reason, engaging in rational dialogue with Dowd, making decisions and resolving disputes through Dowd, demonstrating that Yahweh and Dowd are right under the auspices of free will, thereby eliminating everything that is displeasing and disagreeable. Why can we return to the garden and wear the garden's attire, which is a smile? Because we're comfortable being exposed to God, because Dowd, by fulfilling Chag Matzah, removed our guilt, so we appear ideal, just unblemished and not guilty in his presence. God sees the great in us, the good in us, the wonderful in us, but doesn't see anything that would cause him to eliminate us, to be displeased by us, or to see us as disagreeable. This is the beauty of what Pesach Matzah, and particularly Matzah, represent. It's why it's such a shame that in Judaism, Christianity, and in Islam, there is no recognition for Chag Matzah. None. And yet Chag Matzah is the essence of what he is saying here. Through Dowd, because Dowd carried our guilt on Matzah into Shamayim, into Sheol, which is the equivalent of a black hole, to deposit it there so that it's never seen again, that he has eliminated everything that's displeasing, everything that is disagreeable. So we're devoid of antagonistic implications and frustrations. There is no resentment. There's no lingering animosity. All of these things are gone. There's no reason for God to be displeased. We are perfected. In other words, Paul lied when he said that the Torah can't save. It is the only means to salvation. And it occurs through Dowd. And it occurred on Matzah when it was fulfilled in year 4000 Yah 33 CE. Our Savior, the chosen one, the very Son of God, our Messiah and King, continued. Your instructions, he's speaking now to Yahweh, enable me to be correct. Your willingness to improve me, to teach me, to guide and train me, even provide discipline for me, make me stronger, supporting me, Peel, imperfect, Joseph, Dowd is continually benefiting from Yahweh's guidance under the auspices, again, of volition. And you are never overtly or overly protective or antagonistic. You are not displeased nor all emotionally worked up, neither toxic nor venomous, doing so without indignation. I love this. Mizmor lyrics to sing Psalm 6:1. I love this so much. We're going to conclude this program on it, but let me give you just a shout out as to why this is so magnificent. So we have Yahweh proving his intent, which is to have a family and to have sons and daughters that he can do fun stuff with, that he can engage with, who will work with him, who will make a contribution to this relationship and to the universe and to Shamayim, that will listen to him and that he can trust, and that he proves that case through Dode. Dode is the living exemplar of everything that was wrong with Adam. God proved that a man can be what Adam was not, and that through Dode and the pervasive arguments that have been made through Dode, there is vindication, there is acquittal, there is opportunity, there is all of the evidence and reason that you could possibly need to engage in a rational dialogue. It's marvelous the way that Dode is presented as the ultimate solution, and thereby eliminating everything that is displeasing and disagreeable. This is the very way that God went about eliminating our guilt, by Dode taking it himself with his nephesh soul after fulfilling Pesach as the lamb. Dode on his soul, with the Ruach protecting his soul, his nephesh, carried it into hell, the Sheol, the black hole, and deposited there, never to be seen, never to be released again. All things disagreeable are gone. All things antagonistic. You know, the history of Jews during the Exodus was nothing but a march of antagonism and frustration and resentment and lingering animosity. It's all gone because of what happened on Matzah. And so God's Torah instructions, they enable us to be correct. And that is all that really matters. Dode was right about God, and therefore Dode could be right with God. They make us stronger. They create discipline. They train us. They provide strength to us. They teach us, guide us, improve us. And then this is so subtle but so powerful. And so you're not overly protective nor antagonistic. You know, Yahweh got antagonistic towards Adam and Chava, and he was overly protective. You know, everything that could be harmful was kept from them. They had everything they could need to possibly eat, and yet they were deadbeats. God was overly protective, and so man never grew up, never developed a backbone, never developed character, never showed that he was worth anything that was of interest to God. And so God had to become less overtly protective and to move back and say, you know, you need to demonstrate that you can fall and get back up. I can't hold you up and keep you from falling for you and you to develop any character. It's like a parent with a child that never allows that child to be exposed to failing. Is so protective, wants to manage everything in that child's life. That child has no chance of growing up and maturing and becoming anything more than that parent's dependent. That was our issue in Eden, and Dode recognized it. And so God has to be less protective of us and less frustrated with us for this relationship to work. It's so beautiful. That's the whole reason that we were sent out of the garden. And while we are being invited back in under this unique situation with the tree of lives and the tree of knowledge working together to equip people to grow and to learn and to be responsible contributors to life, so that God is not antagonistic and frustrated by us, which he has been for the last 6,000 years. And therefore, he has to be less overtly protective of us and give us a chance to grow, to learn. You know, so many times I'm told that you can't speak for God and ever have made a mistake. Nonsense. If you haven't made a mistake, you're not speaking for God. God doesn't want to totally control us. He wants us to have this opportunity to fall and get up, because that is how we develop character. You never develop character or strength of personality or show that you're responsible and reliable and dependable. As I say, if you're walking through a garden of lollipops and tulips, you have to fall and get up. You have to have challenges and obstacles to clear to demonstrate that you have the capacity to make a contribution. You have to make a mistake, admit that you make a mistake, learn from that mistake, share the truth as you have learned it, as you have discovered additional evidence, have the confidence to do that, have the character to do that, have the compassion to do that. If you're going to be somebody that is going to be interesting and trustworthy, left off of this planet to go explore the universe in the company of Yahweh. And that is the message of Mizmor Psalm 6:1. And it is a lesson for all time, for all people, and all places and situations. So I thank you for being part of this blustery trade wind kind of a day here on a Thanksgiving Day here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We appreciate having this opportunity to bring this program to you and very much appreciate you listening. Good day.